Wim Hof had a major legal victory yesterday in the $67 million case that alleged that Madeleine Rose Metzger died while performing the Wim Hof method in her pool. The judge, he has thrown the case out. I'm going to tell you a little bit about what happened in the case and what is going to happen next. But if you just want the very, very short version, this is a huge, victory for Wim, but it is by no means the end of what is happening. Laura Hof and Isabel Hof have both declared victory, and Laura Hof even said that the case was closed. This is not actually technically true in the American legal system, as the lawyer, Scott Brust, that's the lawyer for Raphael Metzger, has already told me that he is going to appeal that decision, which will go to a different judge in the appellate court. And if the appellate court agrees that there is no case, then the case will be thrown out. But otherwise, it will be kicked down back to a different judge in a lower court and then proceed, through many, many motions, and we'll see if this case actually goes to trial or not. But I wanted to tell you a little bit about where we are, why it got thrown out, and a little bit of my own analysis about everything that's going on. Okay, so where to start? I have some notes down here. This is all extemporaneous, so forgive me if I get a couple things a little messy as I go through this video. So in the summary judgment, a bunch of evidence was presented, and the judge sort of gets to determine whether or not they like the case. Now, getting up to here was like a year of combative legal motions between the two teams, and from my perspective as a journalist, it looked like the Keystone Cops on one side and the Three Stooges on the other. There were, Wim Hof's camp was lying about some stuff that was very, very easy to fact check, such as they claimed that they never did any business in California, which is obviously not true. And meanwhile, the Metzger case, they're trying to prove something that's actually very, very difficult. Now, I have long maintained that the Metzger case is much weaker than any of the other cases that I have looked at and that I've been reporting on in the last year. That's because when Madeleine Rose Metzger was found face down in her pool at about 1,500 hours, so that's 3 p.m. in the afternoon, there was no security footage. There's no direct physical evidence of what she was doing. The case the Metzgers are trying to say is that she had downloaded the Wim Hof app and had been performing the Wim Hof method on her own, and while performing it in the water, she drowned. And they are further saying that, like I've reported in other videos, that Wim Hof often sets an example of hyperventilating in water, which is a very dangerous message to put out. And I'll link to a video right here. Here, yeah. There will be a video right here, and you can go to minute 14 on it. Maybe I'll play a clip. That clearly shows that Wim is teaching not only hyperventilation in an ice barrel, but actively doing the most dangerous method, which is DMT breathing, which involves a squeeze and blood pressure change, and it's easy to pass out. Now,
pull in, letting go. Pull in, letting go. Pull in, letting go. Pull in, letting go. And now pull in, halt. Contract chest. 3, 2, 1.
Now, they're not going to pass out with Wim right there, but the 5 million people who watch that video, there are going to be people who take the message that this is something you're supposed to do because it's the Wim Hof method. And he's saying in the video, everyone can do this. Okay, so let's go forward. The problem with the Metzger case is they're trying to say that without any direct physical evidence, no one, Madeleine didn't tell anybody that she was going to do it with the Wim Hof method in pool. There's nothing like, there's no security footage. All they have is an Apple Watch, which gave sort of unreliable data that proved nothing. The autopsy report made a few statements. First of all, it showed that she drowned. We all knew this. It said that she had a history of mild COVID, so a little bit of maybe lung impairment there. She had no congenital malformations, so her heart was fine. And she was a very good swimmer. She was known to be a good swimmer. Additionally, the report argued that she carried the SCN3B gene. And this is, the autopsy report says this has uncertain significance, but it could lead to cardiac arrhythmia, which would mean that the heart could beat really fast, and that could lead to passing out and drowning. So it made these arguments, but having a gene is not really cause and effect. And they said uncertain significance. It's not really clear that it did that. And that there's also the Apple Watch, and I have not seen the data personally, the heartbeat data for the Apple Watch yet. However, Isabel Hof, who's Wim Hof's daughter, wrote this on her victory comment today, or I guess last night. The Apple Watch data showed that the heart was steady and then the heartbeat dropped. There was no typical Wim Hof method breathing pattern to see. Well, Apple Watch doesn't collect that information anyway, so okay. She also had a rare genetic disorder where swimming could be potentially dangerous. And then she went on to talk about why I'm a bad journalist, and et cetera. Now, if you look at the autopsy report, it says that the genetic malformation would actually lead her heart to beat extremely fast. And if Isabel Hof is saying that her heartbeat was slow, it doesn't seem like the genetic case, at least the Apple Watch, doesn't indicate that happened. There's also no indication that her heart was changing all that much. I think there were only a few sample times over the course of the day. So maybe the Apple Watch data isn't very useful, but it certainly doesn't corroborate either party's statement. Yet the case was still thrown out. Now, the other reason why the case was thrown out is because the judge ruled that Nachman Barut Bar, MD, so he's a doctor, who wrote this like incredibly long and detailed examination for why she died doing the Wim Hof method. Now, the ruling, and let me just look at it here, it says that the Barut Bar declaration says that the expert doesn't have qualifications and that he's speculating. Now, since I haven't read apparently it's like a 300-page document. I haven't seen it yet, but I will say that to say that he has no qualifications does seem inaccurate since he's, well, pretty accomplished. Here's his CV. He was, let me see, board certified in 1979. He was the chair of medicine at Queen's Hospital in Hollywood. He was a chairman of the Utilization Review Committee, again at Presbyterian in Hollywood, chair of quality management, vice chairman of the Department of Medicine. He seems like an expert to me. So saying that he has no qualifications is, I don't know. I've reached out to him and I want to see what he thinks about having no qualifications. Now, here's the thing here's actually the biggest problem with the Metzger case. And I've often said that it's the worst of all of them. Because the other cases I've talked about, sometimes these cases are caught on security footage, hyperventilating in water and then drowning. Sometimes there's direct witness statements with people saying, hey, my brother told me he was going to go hyperventilate in the pool doing Wim Hof method, and he's been doing it for years because Wim teaches him that. That's the statement from the witnesses who were there. And it's very clear that there's a connection. That's not here in the Metzger case. And then additionally, the other problem with the case is that when Raphael Metzger filed it against against Wim Hof, he also named his ex-wife Tammy Metzger, who he divorced, I think, when Madeline Rose Metzger was quite young. And they have been in a constant legal battle, I believe, since then over custody. They've been suing each other. I think it's mostly Raphael who's the instigator here. It doesn't look good for the Metzgers, or at least for Raphael Metzger, because why would you name your ex-wife if you really believe that Wim Hof was the cause of it? I've raised this with all the parties involved because it is legitimately weird. And there's also both Tammy and Raphael say that they both used the autism diagnosis of Madeline to gain a legal advantage. Now, I just want to say it looks really, really bad. It looks cynical from sort of the outside perspective, but that doesn't mean that that she wasn't hyperventilating in the water. Like, we just don't have really, really great evidence, and it would have been interesting to see what a jury would have found when you presented the full case of what Wim Hof has been teaching around the world, which is, what I've reported on in the past with this video and an attached article if you'd rather read it, which goes into pretty direct detail of Wim repeatedly on video in paid courses that he has teaching hyperventilation water, and then with a warning right next to it saying don't hyperventilate in water. It's a very, very confusing message, and it, in my opinion, is leading people to die, and in the opinions of people who watched their relatives die. It's leading people to die. So what's going to happen next? All right, so Raphael Metzger and Scott Brust will absolutely appeal this. They have 60 days to file an appeal in the court, which will, again, it will kick it up to a higher appellate court who will review the evidence that's already been submitted, and that judge will then rule on whether or not this current judge ruled fairly and whether it should go to trial. Now, if it does pass that appeal process, there's two directions it can go. One, that higher court judge could say, there's no case here, throw it out, and that will be truly victory for Inner Fire. The other thing that could also happen is that judge could say, actually, let's just go try this in front of a jury. They'll kick it down to a different judge, and we'll go through all the same things, and we will see what happens. In order to prevail in a civil litigation in the United States, in this sort of personal injury issue, it's not a criminal case, which means that it's not beyond a reasonable doubt, which is, when someone murders somebody, you need to prove that person definitely did it. Everyone agrees the evidence is just incontrovertible, or 99% likely, beyond a reasonable doubt. Now, in this sort of personal injury civil litigation, the standard of evidence is called a preponderance of evidence, which means we've looked at all the evidence and it's more likely than not, 51% versus 49%, that the defendant is liable, not criminal, but liable for damages. And at that point, then there would be a judgment, an assessment of damages. $67 million seems like a crazy high amount, but who knows? Because I don't know how they're arguing it yet in court. I was actually really excited to fly out to Long Beach and see the trial proceedings just to see how it all came together. Now, whatever happens here, however this comes out, and I don't, again, this is never the strongest case against Wim. It was the only legally filed case. But there are many other cases that are within the statute of limitations that when I look at them, I'm like, that's a slam dunk. It's obvious. There's really, really amazing documentation, which is lacking in the Metzger case, that shows that somebody watched Wim Hof hyperventilating, got the idea that when you're hyperventilating in water, that is the method, and then they did it. And for me, that explains why we have 34 people who have died that I know of, or that have been reported to me doing the Wim Hof method. So, yeah. Now, there's this other thing. Over the years, people are very angry at me for reporting on this. They think I'm betraying Wim. There's actually a 2-hour video online, going, apparently debunking everything I've said. And I'm trying to stick to the facts. And I'm also the only person really reporting on the facts. There were some articles in the British press recently that when I read them, I actually agreed with the Hofs that they were pretty bad articles because what they stated, and this appeared in the BBC, first in the Sunday Times, and also the Daily Mail. If you want to just get a summary, look at the Daily Mail article because there's no paywall for it. What they had said is essentially, yeah, there's this hyperventilation problem, but the bigger issue is that people are jumping into water and having cardiac arrest and drowning, which is so weird because that has never happened, to my knowledge, even once in a Wim Hof method course or with a Wim Hof. Maybe there was one case with a Wim Hof method practitioner who did have a cardiac arrest. That posted a little bit about that on Instagram. The cases that they cited was with a woman named Kelly Poole who was with a Buteyko method instructor. That's Patrick McEwen's sort of slower breathing method. The guy's name was Breath Evolution. And she had an underlying genetic condition, and she died. She drowned. She had a heart attack and drowned. The coroner report came out and showed that's very clearly what happened. Now, the Sunday Times and the Daily Mail all said that was the Wim Hof method, but there was no connection at all to the Wim Hof method. They also cited a case that happened in Italy from a guy jumping in cold water and again drowning. Now, we all know that it's possible to drown doing in the cold water. That of course happens. And they don't all need to be related to the Wim Hof method though. Like just because someone is in cold water doesn't mean it was the Wim Hof method. For me, what's as important is someone thinks they're doing the Wim Hof method. They have received some sort of instruction. Usually it's online through his online video courses. For instance, week 8 of his fundamentals course shows him teaching hyperventilation in water, despite warnings saying don't hyperventilate in water. It's super confusing. and also in many, many, many popular videos that are all over the internet. Okay, so where will this go next? If Wim prevails and this case is thrown out, maybe other people will be more cautious about bringing litigation against the Hof method, because it's obviously a very long and drawn out and emotionally toiling to bring a legal judgment. Personally, I don't think the courts are really the way to solve this unless Wim and his group don't take action. But because Wim hasn't taken action, right? He still keeps all those videos of him hyperventilating.
Hyperventilating like what I did now. Then I felt charged.
Just up on his website, despite knowing, because I've posted about it, I've written to them, I've written to them many, many times, like, you should take this stuff down. I've done public videos saying this stuff's really bad, and they just keep that up there. And I just, for the life of me, cannot understand why. Again, 34 people are dead, and I will continue reporting on this going forward. I have sort of a much more robust video, much higher production video, where you'll see security footage and breathwork patterns and statements from many, many people who have died and their interactions with Inner Fire, where they allege that Inner Fire threatened them when they tried to just tell them that there were some issues. I've certainly been threatened by Inner Fire and the community around them. So, I mean, this is an issue that we need to sort out. And I wish it wasn't that way, because it's funny, because I still practice the breath work every morning. I still do the ice baths every morning. I really do think that there are some super amazing parts to this life-changing method that did change my life. But Wim and Inner Fire has been acting, in my opinion, incredibly irresponsibly. And in my opinion, it's leading to people dying. So we'll see where this goes. Stay tuned. Thank you so much to all of my supporters on Patreon and on Substack who make this work possible. If you want early access and to get your name on the honor roll, please check out those links down below. And, it just means the world to me that you're here. From PokeyBear LLC in Denver, Colorado, this was Scott Carney Investigates.